Before we get to the key themes of Catholic social teaching and talk a bit about where they come from, there are some terms you might hear in this area of theology and ministry. A phrase you might hear in both church settings and secular settings is social justice. What does this mean in our tradition? The U.S. bishops describe what social justice means by pairing it up with what they call charitable works. These two ideas, social justice and charitable works, are opposite sides of the same coin, or what the bishops term the 2 feet of love in action. Here's a little hypothetical fable that I think illustrates the concepts nicely. Imagine you and a friend are hiking in the woods, and you come to a riverbank with a waterfall rising up above you. As you're taking a moment to admire the beautiful landscape, you notice something unusual and terrifying. A baby comes over the waterfall and lands in the river near you. You swim out into the river, of course, and grab the baby, pulling him to shore and rescuing him. You make sure the baby is okay, and you have your friend call an ambulance to get the baby to the hospital. Just as the emergency personnel arrive to take the baby to the hospital, you notice another baby coming over the waterfall. So you save that baby too. This goes on for a couple of days, with a baby coming over the waterfall every hour or so. Volunteers come out to help pull the babies out of the river, and nurses and doctors help care for the babies once they're safe. You decide to go to a town meeting that's going to be discussing the issue. After a few minutes of talk about the rescue system that's in place, someone suggests, hey, why don't some of us go up the river to find out what's happening? Maybe we can keep the babies from falling into the river in the first place. In this little story, rescuing the babies from the river would represent charitable acts, and going up the river to stop the problem at its source would be social justice. We need both feet of love in action to care for the babies well. The U.S. bishops provide some examples of both types of actions. Charitable works meets the basic needs of individuals and includes things like donating to food pantries and clothing closets, volunteering at homeless shelters, and assisting women who face a crisis pregnancy. On the other hand, or the other foot, social justice actions remove root causes of injustice and improve societal structures. Some examples of social justice work include expanding access to affordable housing, extending legal protection to unborn children, and supporting environmental protection laws. Catholic social teaching is concerned with both works of charity and social justice, with a bit more emphasis on the latter, which I'll try to show you with some quotes from popes and bishops. Before we dig into the important themes, though, I want to define 3 more terms for you. The acronym CST is often used when talking about Catholic social teaching. Part of the trick, though, is that the letter T in the acronym can actually stand for 3 different words. These T words are all connected, and sometimes they're used interchangeably, but they each mean something slightly different. The words are teaching, thought, and tradition. Let's take a quick look at all 3. First, there's Catholic social teaching. This phrase is sometimes used as a catch-all for anything related to this field of theology and ministry. More narrowly defined, Catholic social teaching refers to doctrines of the Church that emerge from the official teaching statements by popes and bishops that address social issues. The first of these statements was an encyclical letter by Pope Leo XIII called Rerum Novarum, or Of a Revolutionary Age, which was completed in 1891. Pope Leo was the first pope to write an encyclical letter that looked at social conditions around him and addressed them through a gospel lens. Put on your historian's cap for a minute and think about the year 1891. The Industrial Revolution earlier in the 19th century had brought incredible transformation to Western society, including mass migration into cities and new jobs working in factories. Poor, unsafe working conditions and meager pay led to conflicts between employees and their employers. Reflecting on this tension, Pope Leo asserted the rights of workers to form unions and collectively bargain for better conditions and pay. He wrote that the economy had to serve people, not the other way around. Pope Leo XIII started a trend that subsequent popes continued. Let's look at just a couple of examples. Fast forward 70 years to the early 1960s. Think about what had transpired around the world in those 70 years. 2 world wars, a Great Depression, the use of 2 atomic bombs in Japan, the start of the Cold War, and the building of the Berlin Wall. Against that backdrop, Pope John the 23rd, who's now St. John the 23rd, and who was also a secular Franciscan, wrote an encyclical letter called Pacem in Terris, or Peace on Earth. In this letter, John the 23rd laid out a list of human rights and duties from a Catholic perspective, including the right to food, water, shelter, work, and worship. He called for greater understanding and cooperation between countries in the pursuit of global peace. 2 years after its publication, the United Nations hosted a conference on the letter, and more than 2,000 people attended. Pope Francis has added his own contributions to Catholic social teaching as well. In 2015, he released the encyclical Laudato Si, which addresses our obligation to care for the planet which God has given us as a gift. He connects caring for the environment to caring for the poor and vulnerable, which are often disproportionately harmed by environmental degradation. All told, there are about 15 papal encyclicals that make up the heart of Catholic social teaching, along with statements by bishops' conferences around the world and individual bishops. Let's touch on the other 2 T words that can be part of the CST acronym: Catholic social thought and Catholic social tradition. Catholic social thought is a framework of understanding that includes writings and teachings that come from broader and earlier sources than official Catholic social teaching. After all, Pope Leo XIII wasn't the first Catholic leader to think about the implications of Scripture for how we build our world. The earliest church fathers wrote and spoke forcefully about disciples' obligations to care for the poor and vulnerable. For instance, St. Basil the Great wrote in the 4th century, "The bread which you do not use is the bread of the hungry. The garment hanging in your wardrobe is the garment of him who is naked. The shoes that you do not wear are the shoes of one who is barefoot. The money you keep locked away is the money of the poor. The acts of charity you do not perform are so many injustices you commit." In more modern times, thinkers beyond bishops and popes have contributed to the broad intellectual field of Catholic social thought, introducing topics like eco-theology about our divine call to care for creation. Finally, there is the Catholic social tradition. In addition to intellectual products like documents and books and speeches, the concept of Catholic social tradition also encompasses the whole history of people and movements within the Catholic Church, following the call of Scripture to work for social justice. Start making a list of saints and you'll see how many of them devoted their lives to bringing God's love to the poor and vulnerable, starting with our own seraphic Father, St. Francis of Assisi, St. Vincent de Paul, St. Catherine Drexel, St. Francis Cabrini, St. Damien of Molokai, and so many more. The lives and witnesses of these saints are part of the Catholic social tradition. This tradition also includes movements within the Church that are focused on mercy and compassion. One example of these movements is the Catholic Worker Movement, which 2 disciples named Dorothy Day and Peter Maurin started in the United States during the Great Depression.